welcome to this video tutorial. My name's Nikki. I'm the founder of Studio HOIME. HOIME stands for Here's One I Made Earlier, and I started this business to create kits for people to enjoy craft at home. I provide all of the ingredients and step-by-step guides so that you can make stuff at home, no stress. If you're watching this video tutorial, it's very likely that you've bought one of my wreaths. So thank you very much for your support. I'm incredibly grateful. Today I'm going to be making a traditional citrus wreath kit. There's two types, there's two themes. The other one is cool neutral, but every step of the way I'll tell you what the difference is between the two so that you can transfer what I'm doing to the other kit. It'll be very clear. So I'm here with my trusty assistant. We're ready to go. All you need to do is pour yourself a drink and enjoy the experience.
The first step is to lay out all of your ingredients into piles, as this will make it easier to work. You'll have spruce, a pre-mossed wreath ring with string attached, and as embellishments you'll have 3 pre-wired cones, 3 pre-wired cinnamon sticks, 3 pre-wired lotus heads, and pre-wired fruit slices. For traditional citrus, we're using dried orange slices, but for the cool neutral kit, you'll have dried lime slices or green apple slices, as cool neutral is predominantly green and white. For the foliage, you've also got some eucalyptus, some variegated foliage. This is Eleagnus, but you may get something different depending on stock and what's available to us. The main thing is that it has 2 colours running through it. You'll also have some berried foliage, for example, red holly, which may be variegated. But for cool neutral, this will be mistletoe. And lastly, for traditional citrus, we have variegated ivy. Whereas for cool neutral, instead of ivy, you may have some evergreen foliage, something like this. But the main thing is that it will be evergreen. If you're not sure what that means, it just means green all year round. Oh, and not forgetting, you'll also have a pre-wired Hessian bow. For traditional citrus, this will be a natural in colour, and for the cool neutral kit, the bow will be white Hessian. The only thing you'll need is a pair of scissors. Before we start, the already attached string denotes where the top of your wreath is going to be, because it will hang from this. So this will always be the top. It's worth reminding yourself where the string is before you start each step. The trickiest part is getting the spruce spaced out correctly. So I'd recommend you watch this step in full before attempting it, and then take a few minutes to lay it out first, so you know how close to place the branches. You'll notice some branches are pointy and some form a Y shape. Use these branches together, laying the pointy branch over the Y-shaped branch to create a nice full effect. Plus, it ensures we don't waste any of the spruce. In general, you want to align the middle of the branch with the middle of the mossed ring and work backwards in an anti-clockwise direction. We advise that you start at the top. You can also layer the branches, some slightly pointing out and some slightly pointing in, so that they splay both outwards and inwards, making it feel fuller. All in all, make sure you place the branches in the same direction and work backwards, anti-clockwise, so that the ends of the branches are covering the stems. Once you've done this, check that you're happy with the spacing and that your wreath has full, even coverage. Make a mental note on how much space you've left between each branch. It's worth noting that the stem of your last piece will need to be tucked underneath the tip of the first branch. You should also have all the branches pointing in the same direction. That was the practice run. So now put all your spruce back to one side and we can begin wiring. To wire your spruce, we'll need to first attach our real wire to the mossed ring, starting at the very top. So take the real wire and unwind about 25 centimetres. At the back of the ring, you'll see there's an outer copper ring. We're going to use this to attach our wire. Take the very end of the wire and poke it into the moss so that it comes out the other side of the copper ring. Pull the wire through. Wrap the wire around itself tightly so that it feels secure and poke the bare wire back into the back of the moss. This just helps prevent your front door from getting scratched. As before, I'd recommend that you watch this step in full before attempting it. Okay, so even though this is the top, during this step it's easier to work with the real wire closest to our bodies so that we can tighten and pull better. You'll see what I mean in a minute. So just as we did in the practice, take your spruce and work from the top, which is now closest to you. Remember to make sure that all the branches are facing exactly the same direction. Hold the spruce in place with one hand and with the other hand take your real wire over the branch and then under the ring and give it a firm tug towards you. Remember taking our pointy branches and placing them on top of the Y-shaped branches, overlapping each new branch onto the last one. This may take a few attempts until you get into the rhythm. The real wire should spiral round as you move around the ring, adding the next layer of spruce as you're wiring it in. Pull the wire towards you each time. This is the hardest part of the workshop, so don't stress. If you're not happy with the spacing, it's okay to unwind it and do it again. If it's a little uneven, honestly, there are so many layers to this wreath that you'll be amazed at how it comes together with each step. Plus, we can trim any wayward bits at the end. If in doubt, just persevere. When you come to add the last piece, remember, poke the stem of the last branch underneath the tip of the first one. So that the circle of spruce is continuous. Secure this last piece with the real wire as before. To finish up with the wire a couple more times round, pulling it tight. Then, using your pair of scissors, you want to cut the wire, leaving about 10 centimetres. You're going to want to take the end of the wire and at the back of the wreath, poke it through the moss, making sure it comes out the other side of the outer copper ring, just like we did before. Do this a couple of times and one for luck, and then poke the end of the wire into the back of the moss, making sure there are no sharp ends. And there we have it, the foundation to our wreath. Making sure you know where the top of your wreath is, we can start with the eucalyptus. You'll have 3 sprigs of eucalyptus. You'll notice pretty much everything is in threes. This is just because odd numbers just work better visually, and because with this method we set our foliage and embellishments out in triangles so that all the elements are evenly spaced. Take your first eucalyptus sprig and try to get the stem right into the moss. This will help to keep it fresh. At this point, when I was filming this video, I noticed that I was placing my eucalyptus right at the top of my wreath, so I decided to shift it around a little. Make sure that all the foliage is positioned so that it's following the same direction as the spruce base. We're going to pin this down, so don't worry about it not being secure at this point. Do this with the other 2 eucalyptus sprigs. Once you're happy with the spacing of the eucalyptus and it's positioned in a triangle formation, we're going to pin it down using the green floristry wires. We need to make a hook, so imagine your wire in thirds and at the 2/3 point, bend it to make a lopsided U shape. We'll use this to pin the eucalyptus down so that the U is either side of the stem. Both ends of the wire need to go through the moss ring completely and out the back. A little tip, it's easier to push the wire through if you hold the wire as close to the end as possible. Put the long end in first and then the short end and push all the way through. Once both ends are through, fold the wire back on itself and poke it back into the moss. Do the same with the other wire. Repeat this step to pin down the other 2 pieces of eucalyptus. So now we have our 3 eucalyptus sprigs pinned into place. So now we're going to add our variegated foliage. Variegated meaning it has 2 colours going through it. For cool neutral, this will be green with a white or cream colour running through it. We're going to secure this in the exact same way as we did with the previous step. So first, position your foliage halfway between the eucalyptus, poking the stems into the moss. When you're happy with your positioning, take your floristry wire and using the 2/3 to a third trick, make a lopsided U shape and pin the variegated foliage in place, remembering to poke the wires all the way through and back into the moss as before. Ta-da! Variegated foliage added. Next, we're going to work in our berries. For traditional citrus, we've got red holly berries, but for cool neutral, you'll have green or white berries, such as mistletoe. To begin with, I would place the berries in position, laid out again in a triangle formation. I'm going to nestle mine in between the variegated foliage and eucalyptus. Once you're happy you've picked the best spot for your berries, pin them down just as before with your floristry wires. There we go. You should start to see your wreath taking shape. At this point, it's probably a good idea to work out where you might want to place your bow. Keep this in mind as you start to add the embellishments, just so that your bow doesn't sit on top of anything and look a bit clumsy. Some people choose to put their bow at 12 o'clock, others at 6 o'clock, and some people put theirs to the side at, say, 7 o'clock. It's totally up to you where you put it, but just leave some space for it. Next up, we're going to add our lotus heads. These have already been pre-wired for you, so we're just going to put them straight into the wreath. If you want to play around with the layout first, go ahead. When you're ready to fix them in place, poke the wire all the way through the centre of the moss ring and pull through the other side, giving it a gentle tug to really make sure it's nestled in. This wire is actually a bit too long, so I'm just going to cut it down to about 5 centimetres. And then to finish, again, bend the wire back on itself and poke it back into the moss. Do this with the other two. It's really beginning to come together now. Now it's time to add the pine cones. We're going to do exactly the same and place them in between the lotus heads. Next, we're going to do the same with our cinnamon sticks, spacing them out evenly. And lastly, for the embellishments, we're going to add some colour with our dried fruit slices. As I'm making a traditional citrus wreath, I'll be using orange slices, but if you have a cool neutral kit, you'll have lime slices or green apple slices. Just as we did before, position and secure the dried fruit. Once in place, you can tweak the angle, so you can decide whether you want them to sit flat, upright, or at an angle. But be gentle, as these can be fairly fragile. Next, we're adding our variegated ivy. For the cool neutral kit, you'll have plain evergreen foliage for this part. To position the ivy, you want to weave it in amongst the elements to give your wreath one extra bit of depth and texture. As the ivy sprigs are quite long, we're going to pin it in place with our U-hooks, just as we did before. It's a good idea to use 2 hooks for this, as it can flap about, so pin it a little way in at either end. The final piece of the puzzle is the bow. A little tip, you can fold the hessian over the wire to hide where the wire is attached. You should have some space left over for it to sit. I decided to put mine at the bottom of my wreath. So again, and at the risk of sounding like a broken record, poke the wire all the way through, fold it back on itself, and push the end all the way into the back of the moss. Once in place, you can manipulate the hessian to make the bow look plush and full. So just give it a little zhuzh until you're happy with it. And there you have it, your Christmas wreath complete.
So that's it, we're done. I hope you're pleased with your finished results, and I'd love to see pictures. If you follow me on Instagram and tag Studio HOIME, I'd love to see all the results. I suppose the last thing to do is wish you a Merry Christmas and thank you again very much for joining me.